Use the gavel. Welcome, everyone, to our July 10th, 2018 Ogden City Council meeting. This is a special City Council meeting, and let the roll call reflect that all council members are present tonight. Councilmember White, however, is with us electronically. Councilmember White, would you like to say hello?
Hello.
And we will turn the time to Vice Chair Nadolski for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. If you'll please rise and join me in the singing of our pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now, if you would please join with us for a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. First is for the strategy session of April 10th, 2018. Councilmember Blair.
Yes, thank you, Chair Heyer. I have reviewed those minutes and found them to be correct.
And the work session of April 10th, 2018. Councilmember Choberka.
Yes, I have reviewed those minutes and they appear to be correct.
Okay.
And I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Choberka, second by Councilmember Blair to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Did we miss Councilmember White?
Hi.
Okay, thank you.
Gotcha.
Any opposed? All right, they'll stand approved.
I'm not so good with the mute and unmute button. Sorry.
Okay, we just didn't want to forget you, so thanks for responding. Next item we have.
Oh, don't worry. You won't forget me.
Okay, public hearings. Fiscal year 2019 final budget. This is continued from June 20, I don't remember what day, but we have Ms. Eller-Smith to present to us right now. Welcome. Appreciate you being here.
Mr. Johnson was teasing me earlier that it's like 50 ways to present the budget, so this will be a little bit different way to present it today. I decided to take a little bit different tack as we're talking today. The staff and I, council staff and I, participated in a webinar, and it's a series webinar about budgeting. And I thought it was important for the council to participate, the staff to participate, because we're always looking for new ideas and make sure that we're using best practices in our budgeting process. So I just wanted to remind everybody today is the second of 3 public hearings that we're having on the budget. We just completed the Facebook Live event, and August 7th will be the final date and also the final consideration and adoption of the budget. So as I mentioned in this webinar, the presenter really just sort of got back to basics, and it made me think, this is probably really important for the citizens to understand what the city budget is, because it's a little bit different than a personal budget. So he just asked the question, what is the budget and why is it important to me? And I think citizens could do well to ask themselves that, why is it important to me? So the budget for the city is the primary policy document, and I think that's really key. We've been working really hard because this is one of the main roles of the city council is to pass a budget that's appropriate for the city and allows the city to provide the kinds of services that citizens want. And so in that document, it's a statement of priorities. I mean, what shows your priorities more than where you spend your money? So it tells the citizens what kind of services they can expect. It shows them how their tax dollars are being spent, how we're allocating resources to achieve things that are important to the community, like arts or like other activities that are planned. So it takes those policies and priorities that the council does, and it's a way to put them into action. So not only is it that primary policy document, but it also serves as a control tool for the administration. It gives them the legal authority to run their day-to-day operations. You know, the mayor's in charge of running the day-to-day operations of the city. It gives him the legal authority to spend those funds in the way that the council and the citizens want them to do that. It makes sure it sets those spending limits and provides that fiscal oversight that's important. And hopefully it's a way of showing accountability and trust, and of course that really important word of transparency. With regard to transparency, you know, as soon as the budget comes from the mayor, not only does the accounting staff post the proposed budget from the mayor, but they also give a line item budget. So if citizens are interested, and we have a few that are and have been, they can go through the line item budget just like the council staff does. The budget serves as an important management tool, so it's a spending plan. And in this regard, it's more like a personal budget. It shows how much services cost, and I think that's really important for the layperson, so to speak, to understand that it's really expensive to maintain roads and water infrastructure and all of the kinds of things that happen every day that they sort of take for granted. And it's also a planning tool. It provides that long-term fiscal sustainability, and we've been working really hard to move from budgeting from year to year to sort of being more projected out several years so that we are ensuring that we have that fiscal sustainability in place. One of the things that we did differently this year in the budget process is as we met with each of the city departments, and as Councilmember White mentioned in the Facebook Live, is we asked them to provide some information specific to their departments regarding their goals, both what they'd achieved in the previous year and what they hope to achieve in the coming year. But we also asked what their challenges were. And it struck me and the rest of the staff how consistent those challenges were across the departments. Number one challenge across the departments was retention and recruitment. You know, we talk a lot about police and fire, but it was, I think, a surprise to all of us to learn that it's not just police and fire that are having a hard time retaining the good employees that we have. Equipment and infrastructure needs, they're high dollar bills that come with the equipment that the city needs to provide the kinds of services we need and to have the infrastructure in place. And then shrinking availability of state and federal funding. You know, the city has seen a tremendous drop-off in the amount of dollars coming from the federal government to the city. And so we're having to do the best that we can in making sure that the funding that we do have can still provide the kind of services that the citizens are expecting. As mentioned, there is a proposed tax increase for this year, 8.82%, which will generate $1.2 million. And the impact of that is about $27 on the average home, so that's $2.26 a month. And this is how it's been proposed to spend that extra $1.2 million. Significant portion of it is going to the Public Safety Loyalty Pay Program to try and retain those good officers that we have in both police and fire. And then another significant portion is going to Union Station, which is sort of the crown jewel of 25th Street. It needs some love and attention. And then there's 2 full-time positions that are proposed, an additional accountant, and just wanted to remind you that our own auditor commented that we run on a very lean staff, and it was about 1.5 accountants short. So they're proposing to hire 1 additional accountant and then make the part-time diversity officer full-time. So that's my presentation. Just again, remind everybody of that final budget hearing on August 7th, and that we post all of our documents on the city's website, and they can go there anytime if they have additional questions. The city staff, the council staff is always happy to answer questions. If someone wants to give us a call, we'll do our best to answer it, and if we can't, we'll get the answer from somebody who can. So that's all I have. I don't know if you have any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Eller-Smith? Thank you for the presentation. That was very well.
Very good.
Okay, this is a public hearing. This is a time when you as the public can come and address the council concerning the budget. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name for the record. Now would be the time.
She needs help getting up. Yeah, she's just having a hard time getting up.
She's actually in the camera if we hit her right anyway, so.
I hear
1, 2. Check 1, 2.
My question is, on the budget, the amounts that is put into it or the expenses that are put into it. The reason being is I went through and I evaluated and got parts and supplies and everything else for a house to completely be re-roofed, to have the inside, outside, electrical, vents, and everything. And my purchase was $6,000. And yet a purchase on a bid will be $15,000 to do the dang same roof. Now, how come there's such a difference in somebody contracting that amount as to the city because they want more money to pay their employees decent wages? I understand that. But still, why is there such a variance in the pricing of that type of building or any other structure that is being built? If people go down and look at it and really price things out, they're going to see a very big disparity in that.
Okay, I'm not sure we're qualified to answer that. Anybody want to make an effort?
Let's gather all the questions.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Thank you. We'll try and answer that question after we've gotten all of the questions. Anybody else wish to address the council? Yes, thank you, Sebastian. Welcome.
Thank you. I am Sebastian Benitez, Ben Landowski neighbor.
See you, neighbor.
I wear like that because I respect you guys. I honestly respect you a lot. But I disappoint for a few things, you know. My first question is, the budget is to keep the employer from the city employee to pay better, something like that. That is my question for you guys.
Like I said, we'll take a note of your question and we'll answer them at the end.
Okay. Yeah, the budget, the city budget is absolutely different about the personal budget. I agree that. But the corporation budget is similar to my business. As a businessman, I know the budget is really hard. And my principle is small government, more efficient. And I write letters. I don't want to make like problem in the city. Honestly, I don't want to make problem here. I try to help. I suggest 7 point for this budget in the city. I sent to you guys by email. First, number one is cut high salaries. I don't know you know or not exactly how much money make 26 people in the city, the high people here. Cut bonus. If you cut the bonus and salary, you can have enough money to cover. And I love the city, but I am losing safety in my county, in my neighborhood. And the mayor has 7 years to find out how we can have professional and competitive police department. And I cry when I see in 2015 we are going to lose 38 police officers. And I cry when I meet with the chief, the police chief, a couple months ago, and when we lose around 50 again. We are losing great people here taking care of us in our safety community. Please, I want you to read my email to you. I disappoint to hire the property taxes, and I am asking resignation in the email. That email is personal email for everyone, you guys. I hope you read that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Almost going. Okay. Seeing no movement, I'll look for a motion to continue the public hearing to August 7th.
Chair, I will go ahead and make a motion that we continue the public hearing to August 7th, 2018.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Blair, seconded by Vice Chair Nadolski, to continue the public hearing to August 7th. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will look forward to more comments on the 7th. Next item on our agenda is
Are we going to address the?
Oh, yes,
questions?
please. Oh, thank you so much. I lose track. So, Mr. Johnson, you want to start out with some answers for us?
Well, I hope I understood the questions. If I understood the first question correctly, it's was why does it cost us seemingly more to do a project than the average citizen would if they replace their roof? Or there's a couple things in play. One, the standard that we have to build for a public building is higher than it is for a residential unit. Two, we have specific rules and laws that the state gives us that govern how we bid, who we bid. We have to follow those procedures and rules. We don't have a choice. We have to go out to bid. Going out to bid sometimes is more expensive. Sometimes you get a better price. We're supposed to be taking the low bidder, and so we don't always have control over the process because the state legislature actually mandates the process we have to go through in order to bid out projects and to go through that project, that bidding and the design and et cetera. We have to pay design dollars. We have to pay for all kinds of things for a public building so that if there were catastrophe, we have to we have to be able to show that we did due diligence in planning the building and building the building and so forth. So it isn't apples to apples with a residential place and how they would do that. We can't simply go down to Home Depot and purchase things and then build like a bathroom or build a building or re-roof a building. We have to follow state standards. We have to follow state bidding standards, and so it at times might cost more. But the state's real interested in not being biased. They're interested in us not being crooked or giving projects to our friends. We represent the citizens' dollars, and so they want to make sure that we're being fair in who we hire and how we hire. So if I understand the question correctly, I hope that answers it. The second question, I'm not sure I really understood. I think if you went to corporate America and you found a $200+ million corporation, you would be paying executives to run that corporation and make decisions much more money than we make. I don't think our salaries are out of line with other cities of our size, but you figure we're running a $200 million corporation. That's a good sized company. And I think what we try and pay people is fair for the position that they have. We're trying to hang on to the people that we have. But I don't think it's as simple as just saying, well, cut out 3 or 4 people and then the city will run just fine. I don't know that that's the case. And I have a strong feeling that we try and be as prudent as we can with money. I don't think anyone is getting rich working for the city, and most of the people could probably, some of the people could make more money in corporate America by going outside. I'm not sure that answers the question I heard, but I think I think we feel comfortable with the people who run the corporation, which is the city, and protect it. And there's a lot to running a corporation this size. There's risk, there's liabilities, there's finding the right people, of setting the direction, of trying to get redevelopment, of trying to make sure that our police force is intact and doing the right things, and fire, and that we pick up garbage every week, and it goes on and on and on. You think about the services we provide are so broad and so wide, and it does take some expertise to be able to run that on a regular basis. And if you compare our salaries to a city like Salt Lake or Provo or some of the other cities, I think our salaries are still pretty modest in comparison.
Would you like to address the police, the losing of police officers, or?
We are trying our very hardest to hang on to every police officer we possibly can. We're working on any issues we find. We're working on the pay issues as fast as we can. The problem is we do not have the property tax resources that other police departments may have, like Salt Lake. Salt Lake is our capital city. Salt Lake has property tax coming out their ears. They can afford to pay more for the police. They can afford more police officers per capita than we can. We're trying to do the best we can with the money that we have. We're trying to hang on to our police officers and our firefighters and our engineers and our IT personnel and our HR people and so forth. We're trying to make sure that we offer the best package, pay, benefits, et cetera, that we can possibly add. We try to, we've been creative, I would think, in the last few years. I saw a report yesterday that talked about that our attrition in the police department has actually gone down in the last year. I think that's a good sign, and we're hoping to continue. But there is a shortage of 600 police officers in the state of Utah, which is off the charts if you think about it, that it is hard to hire a police officer right now. The way the movement of America has gone, it is not considered, I don't think, in a lot of people's eyes, as honorable a profession as it really is. And so with 3.1 as our unemployment rate, it is hard to get people to want to come be a police officer. But we're doing our very best. We're trying to raise, I was in a meeting today with several police officers who were very grateful for what's been done lately, and very grateful to the council, and very grateful that the administration help devise some plans to be able to funnel more money towards them to maybe keep them here in our city. We spend a lot of money training, and we really like to have them stay long enough to be able to take advantage of that training that we give them. So we work very hard at it, and I don't think it's as simple a solution as one would think. I think that it's a very complex thing, and it's a lot of money, that will take to solve this, and it's going to have to happen over time. And we're going to do our very best to try and keep every good officer we can keep, every good firefighter we can keep. We're going to try and keep every employee, good employee. I mean, our goal is we're a family, and we want to stay family.
Thank you. If I might just put Vice Chairman Nadolski on the spot a little bit, as to give a council perspective, we've had a lot of discussions as council members about this very issue, and no one is more passionate about it than you are, so I thought I'd like to give you a minute to talk about that.
Appreciate that. Yeah, you are putting me on the spot, but I will say that, as my neighbor mentioned, some of us have had 7 years to keep what's happening in the state of Utah from happening to us. And I don't think in any of those 7 years we've ever had 600 open positions, meaning there are police departments around us that are actively hiring 600 police officers. No one can predict that. No one can adequately prepare for that. But the consequences of doing nothing in response to that are catastrophic to our public safety, because I think I feel the same way you do about our police department. We've got to have them. And not only when we need them, we need the best. And we have invested in them, and we need them to stay. And we need collectively, not just here behind this dais, but collectively as a community. Retention, we were just informed yesterday, is something that requires the attention of everybody. And so we are in a difficult position, and we are not the only community. Everybody's dealing with this, with maybe one exception, Salt Lake City. But there are too many positions and not enough people to fill them. And we've got to be as competitive as we possibly can. I do want to share a story about, I don't know if it answers any of your questions, Sebastian, but I think it relates to your concerns. There was a day, I remember when I was knocking on doors to be elected, I think we knocked on about 3,500 doors in my district. It was exhausting. But there was only one time that I remember being asked about taxes. And I remember pretty vividly because I was in this gentleman's garage, and we talked about three things. We talked about muscle cars, because he was working on a 1964 and a half Mustang while we chatted. We talked about guns, and we talked about taxes. And it's the only time I remember being asked about taxes. And I told him, no way, no how am I ever going to consider raising taxes. And I remember that so vividly because as I look back from my position now, and I think I've been elected, and I hope you rely on me to do as much homework and to learn as much as I possibly can, I have learned a lot more about how taxes work in Utah since that day. And I realized that when I told that constituent that answer, that I gave him a very uninformed answer. And I have regret for that. But I reflect back on that because I remember what I thought I knew versus what I've come to learn now. And it's hard for me to reconcile running a $200 million corporation on the exact same dollar amount of 1986. And that is exactly what this city's been doing. And I know that if I had said, oh yeah, I'm going to raise your taxes, that he wouldn't have voted for me. And I also know that as we consider these tax proposals, those are very politically unpopular. But it's also very unpopular and irresponsible for us to run this corporation on the same exact dollar amount that we made in 1986. I would hazard to guess that if I ran a business in that way, I would not be charging the same amount to my customers that I was charging in 1986. But before I raise prices on my customers, I would make sure that I have found every way to save money. And that's exactly what we do in our Facebook Live event. The question came up, what do you do to require efficiencies? We required in every single step of this process for the administration to show us exactly where we're saving money and where we're not. And that is the first step before we ever consider any increases to the taxes. I share that story because I reflect on it a lot, and it changes the way govern, and lead. And I feel like folks think that we are knee-jerk reaction raising taxes when we consider these proposals, but it's really important to remember that inflation has taken a tremendous toll on this community and that we are struggling to keep up with the services and the expectations of the community because we did not keep up with inflation for so many years, decades. We did not do it. And I recognize that I have an election next year. I recognize that the decisions I'm making have a political consequence. But I don't think I could make those kinds of decisions without losing sleep. I feel like we've got to do what's right. And I'm a very fiscally conservative individual. And right out of the gate, I'm opposed to taxes, but I'm also opposed to unsustainable finances for our community. So I hope that helps you recognize where we're, or at least where I'm coming from as these decisions are before us. And also recognize that the proceeds from tax revenues are going almost exclusively to our police department to address the exact issue that you identified, because we all share in our concerns for it. It keeps me up at night. There are very few things, there are a handful of them, I'll admit, in this job that keep me awake at night, but the need to provide for our police is the number one thing that costs me sleep in this job. So I'd invite you anytime to my house. We see each other often in the neighborhood. I'm happy to talk about the safety to our neighborhood and talk more in detail about the concerns you've raised, because they're concerns we all share. Thanks.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Take a few minutes on.
Go ahead.
As I started out with our Facebook, I mentioned that there was one important aspect of being a council member, and that was formulating a budget. Within the confines of that budget, there's a tax. And we review that, and I think every council member agonizes over that and looks at that. And I think Janine did a great job in presenting why we have a certified tax rate and what happens when there is an increase in our taxes. Where does the 8.82% go? And there was mention tonight about we were concerned of losing our police and firefighters. Almost 50% of the generated revenue from that tax is going to our police and fire, so that we can provide a safe community, so that we can provide our firefighters an opportunity to, as Mark mentioned, is staying here in our community. Our directors are very professional in what they do, and they're very committed. And they look for ways that they can cut their cost, and they look for ways that they can do it effectively. And they're in the service of trying to provide services for us all in our city. The property value is given by Weber County. They assess our property, and we have an opportunity, if we have a question about that, an opportunity to question that with the Weber County. But overall, our budget this year is probably flat compared to other years. There's very little increase in our budget. But as mentioned before, that is the most important aspect that we have with our, as council members, to formulate that budget. Today I attended a meeting, and there were 4 firefighters that was sworn in as firefighters. They're excited about doing that, of becoming a firefighter. We want them to spend their career here in Ogden so that we can receive a benefit of their training and their service to us. And these are young men, and they're starting out. We have one of the best fire departments in the state. We have the best chief in the state. We have his leaders are the best in the state, and they're going to train those 4 individuals to how to do their job. Yes, they're going to make a mistake, but once they make a mistake, they're going to correct that and become a better firefighter. I'd rather have them being well equipped and well trained to come and service my home if I needed their help. And I'm doing that because I'm trying to retain both our police and fire in our community and make it a safe community. That's what we look at a budget, and I don't think any of us take the budget lightly. I think we agonize over it, and we haven't finalized it. And it's great to hear comments from the citizens of how, or suggestions of how they think we can look at the budget differently. It's your budget. It's not my budget. It's not Chairman Hires' budget. It's our budget. And we want to hear from you to make sure that we can understand what struggles you're going through so that we can make those corrections and look at it at a different viewpoint. So if you have any comments, give us a call. We're open 24/7, so you can give us a call anytime. But
I'm not. Don't call me in the middle of the night.
But I'm willing to hear from you and hear what your suggestions would be.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I think Mr. Benitez wishes to comment again, but I would just recommend you wait for the public comment at the end. Since we've already
I
closed
think
the
that would be,
public
yeah,
hearing.
if we can wait till the public comment, it's not too far away, so, all right. Okay, well, we'll move on. The next item is our First Security Bank Building Local Historic Resource Designation.
Greg Montgomery will be presenting.
Mr. Montgomery, welcome.
Mr. Chair. And members of the council, what you have before you tonight is a recommendation that's been forwarded from the Landmarks Commission regarding the First Security Bank Building at the corner of 24th and Washington Boulevard. The city has what they call an Ogden Register of Historic Places. This identifies buildings that have special qualifications and are placed on the register to protect those significant buildings in Ogden. There are 137 buildings presently on the local register. Those include buildings on 25th Street, Eccles, and Jefferson Historic Districts, as well as individual buildings. And that Landmarks Register is administered by the Landmarks Commission, is appointed by the council. As they look at requests for nominations, and anyone can make a request to nominate a building on their local register, they look at 4 criteria. One is the historical significance of the property that's being requested for nomination. Does it have a historic event that took place there? Is it significant of the life of important people who had meant a lot to Ogden? Does it signify the culture of the community as it has grown and developed? Another aspect to be on the register is, does it have architectural significance? In other words, does this embody some distinct architectural style and a quality and a manner that is unique? We have many, many buildings in the city. Many of them have the same architectural styles, but there are some that stand out in terms of the quality of the design, the articulation of how they designed the building, and the things that were done that were unique to set it apart. Those items of outstanding design character become something that can place an item as an opportunity for be on the local register. Also, there's a criteria of neighborhood significance. Does the building have a place that stands out to the community and becomes an icon? You may say, is it a landmark building? Landmark can mean many different things, and that's in that context, but it means people are drawn to those buildings because of what exists there, how they relate to the neighborhood around them, the scale of the building, the materials it's made out of. Those all become, again, items for consideration to be placed on the register. So with this specific building, before 1927, there was a Utah National Bank formed. And banks were combined during that time frame to create the first national bank. Those involved in the First National Bank were important people in the community, the Brownings, the Eccles, others, and as those banks came together, formed the First National Bank, it was decided in 1927 to build a 12-story office building to house the bank. In this photo prior to that time, you can see the encircled in red what had been on that corner prior to the First Security Bank building. Eber Piers was commissioned to be the architect for the building, and he designed this 12-story building, taking elements of the prairie style that Frank Lloyd Wright had made famous throughout the country, and adding those elements to the top of this building, which is very unique. That was, a 12-story prairie style building is not found anywhere else in the state of Utah. The building was so important, the Standard Examiner mentioned when the building was dedicated, that this was a building that symbolized the achievements of Ogden, that showed the economic strength of the community by building this building, and that it typifies where Ogden is heading in the future with the strength and the abilities that took to make this building and how it could be a site for future people interested in Ogden to show the stability of the community. This shows that now the building after it's constructed. Looking the other direction, this is looking north on Washington Boulevard. And again, there's that structure. As the Landmarks Commission reviewed this, then they felt this building actually met all three criteria. It has historical significance in terms of the people who were involved with the development of the bank to begin with, Mariner Eccles, George Eccles, Mariner Browning. It also signifies that with that merger of those individuals and the creation of the bank, the significance Ogden had in the Intermountain West and the economic strength that was in the community. Architectural, as I mentioned, this is a prairie-style design. As you look at the top of this building, you can see those geometric patterns, the changing color. Those are all elements of the prairie style. And that in this building with the base, the main part of the structure, and then that top part of the cap, as we sometimes make note of, it retained very distinct architectural styles that aren't found in many other buildings in the state of Utah. The significance of this in terms of neighborhood was this is the prominent corner. 24th and Washington was the center spot of the community. And being located down here, being the tallest building in the community, it was very visible and still is very visible. You look at many pictures of Ogden throughout the years, two buildings stand out, Ben Lomond and the First Security Bank building. Those become the icons to the skyline of the city. And because of that visibility, it says, this is Ogden, you're here. You identify that really easily. And that neighborhood significance is important. What does it mean to be on the local register? Basically, it means that the city is saying this is a unique building that needs to be preserved, both preserved from demolition and also preserved in the key elements of why it is so unique to the community. The Landmarks Commission being on the register, they look at the exterior of the building, and any changes proposed to that are then reviewed for appropriateness. It doesn't mean you cannot make changes. It doesn't mean you can't do some revisions. Many things have happened over the years to that building in terms of stair towers and other things that have been built. But the Commission's charge is to try to preserve the character of the building and preserve its history that the city can look at and see the history of that building by it being there. To the owner, the concern that comes up is that this now requires a review of exterior work. It doesn't require a review of anything interior, but it would require a review of exterior work if changes are being proposed. And it doesn't prohibit revisions, but it has a standard review that needs to take place. The present owner of the property, or the managing partner of the property, has gone on record, and we have had discussion that they are opposed to this being placed on the register. They feel that being on the register will give additional cost burdens to the property. It hasn't been able to be marketed for 10 years, and feels that putting it on the register will even make it harder to market the building, because investors are looking at this as another layer of regulation. The one comment I'd have is it has been 10 years vacant without being on the register, and that hasn't happened. Nothing has happened to the building. What would happen with being on the register is an opportunity to say this is a building that's going to be here. If you will, it's almost be more secure in making the investment because the city is behind that this is an important building to the community. As I mentioned, they're not in favor of the nomination. And I think when it comes down to then the decision of what you look at are a lot of factors besides those the Landmarks Commission has recommended to you of why this building is important to be on the register. The building is on a small footprint but has a very high tax value per acre, if you will, because of where it sits. And historic buildings provide a lot of options for uses. If you remember the Urban 3 and study, one of the comments was made that one of the things important about older buildings is they are versatile for many different things, and the infrastructure is already built in. The detail of the building is already in place, and those aren't things you can replicate in today's economy. And those are things that you can draw upon to make this building even more valuable than other buildings that may be constructed as new buildings. There will always be a gap on some of these older buildings. In other words, the economic value versus what the building cost, whether it be on the register or not. Those older buildings do have that gap. And so that is something that needs to be worked out, but that would be something that would exist even if it were not on the register. And also, sometimes the idea of rehab costs more, depends what you're looking at. A lot of these buildings have some efficiency built into them of embodied energy that are used to make the materials to begin with and are still retained. And if it's just a quick fix, it may be a little costly, but if you look at the long-term life cycle, sometimes it's cheaper in that long-term life cycle to renovate these buildings than to build brand new. So those are important things. And the last thing that you can't put a value on is the impact that building has to the identity of the community. We all relate to that building. Even when it's still vacant, we relate to it as part of the skyline, as part of the city. And that has a value that you can't put a number to it. It is part of the community. And that's some of the other reasons why when you look at this, it's important to place it on the register. So in recommending to you to place the building on the local register, the Landmarks Commission has found that it does meet the criteria of having historical significance, architectural significance, and neighborhood significance, and that it embodies the character of Ogden and what Ogden is all about. And for those reasons, it's important to place it on the local register. And they made this recommendation on a 6-0 vote.
Any questions for Mr. Montgomery? Okay, thank you. This is also a public hearing. If you would like to address the council concerning the local historic resource designation of the First Security Bank building, consider this a good time to come forward.
Motion, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Nadolski, seconded by Councilmember Blair to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. What's your pleasure?
Hearing no opposition, I'll make a motion that we adopt proposed ordinance 2018-17 as presented.
I second it.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Nadolski, seconded by Councilmember Stevens to adopt ordinance 2018-17. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Councilmember Traverka?
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember White?
Aye.
Vice Chair Nadolski?
Aye.
Chair Heyer?
Aye. That passes. All right, next item is annexation of a portion of Weber County at 860 West 24th Street. We have received a protest, or what do we call that? Protest petition, and which makes that to where they're eligible to do that. You want to talk about that for just a second?
Sure, thank you. So as you mentioned, we did receive a protest on this one. I just wanted to give a little bit of background on this one and why this one is a little bit different than the next item on the agenda. So this one is specific to the 860 24th Street. As I mentioned, this is slightly different in that the county did review this option, but did not forward a recommendation to the city to annex the property. So essentially what this turns into is a city-initiated petition rather than a county-initiated petition or the way that the next item is set up. And the way that works with it essentially being a city-initiated petition, there are different thresholds for citizen or for property owner protest. Since this was just one single property owner involved in this one, any protest would constitute 100% of the property owners and 100% of the value. And that would obviously exceed any threshold that we would have. So late this afternoon, they did file a protest formally with the recorder's office. Because of this, the process is stopped, and essentially this item is terminated. So there's no need to proceed any further with this item. No action is required, and we don't need a public hearing for this one on the 860 24th Street. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions for Mr. Symes? Okay, thank you. All right, we will then move on to our next item, in as much as there is no action required there. The annexation of islands of unincorporated Weber County. And we have Mr. Montgomery back, it looks like.
You do. So this is a two-part review. One is a recommendation that had been forwarded to you from Weber County regarding islands of unincorporated county land within the city limits that should be considered by the council for annexation. Second part is a recommendation by the Planning Commission that if you consider these properties for annexation, what should their zone be? So as I start this presentation, I'd like to just kind of review, first of all, about annexations and what is this all about? You know, we live in a community where we've experienced lots of changes over the years. This photo in 1975 shows the western portion of the area between Pennsylvania and 1900 West. And you can see there's three dots there, three stars there, of the only development really that was out in that area other than some homes. And that was the grain silos, what was Jetway, and that was then Marquardt or Volvo White, and now is Autoleave. Compare that 1975 photo with the 2018 photo, and you can see all the development that has taken place in that area around those three stars. Those three stars occurred because in 1948 the city put a water line down Pennsylvania Avenue, and that then started the ability for development to take place. Those changes also show up in municipal boundaries. 1972, the city boundary stopped at Pennsylvania Avenue. Today, you can see the city boundary extends out to 1900 West, goes out towards the Hinckley Drive and the airport. But you see in that map those white areas of unincorporated county that were left as development that happened all the way around them, and those properties as they developed were annexed into the city. These areas are what we refer to as islands. They now become surrounded by incorporated city. And not just Ogden, but any city or any area can determine to incorporate and go through processes. And the reason they want to incorporate is because they want to have control of what happens in their area. They want to be able to facilitate, as you talked tonight, police and fire protection, and be able to have a control of those items: water, sewer, road maintenance, garbage collection, parks. All those things are reasons communities incorporate. They then are able to take in local control being elected to govern those areas, planning for what the character of that municipality would be, and minimizing the need for special services by contracting with other people, because that incorporated area can now take care of those services by coming together. They also set a defined tax base, which of course you do every year, and all unincorporated areas do. And as growth has occurred, many other communities have incorporated around Ogden City being the first in 1851, and other communities incorporating in the early 1900s and even the late 1900s up around Ogden City. And in those incorporations, to create that control, to minimize service districts and inequalities of double taxation, each of those communities sets patterns of how they would grow and develop, and each community talk together to say, okay, we can service this far, you can service this far. These are the areas when development occurs we can expand into, knowing that you can also expand this way, so we don't want overlap in those expansions. Well, through time, that has left what we've called islands and peninsulas, because that pattern has not always been consistent in terms of just following sequentially down the road, if you will. As I made mention of Jetway and Scholar, there was no city around them, but the services were there, so they developed. And once they were developed, there was no need for annexation because they had what they needed. So those islands remained, and everything else started to fill in around them as now the city started making logical growth, and there were pieces of property that were contingent to each other, so you could annex them. As I mentioned, that created two things: islands, which are completely surrounded by a municipality, or peninsulas, which may have an open end. For example, you look to the east of us, well, it's all unincorporated county, up over the mountain, over to Huntsville, those areas. Those are all unincorporated, so that is a peninsula. It is not surrounded by incorporated area. State law was created several years ago to address these developed islands and how do they come into the municipality when there is nothing to trigger that. They are already receiving their services, though in most cases they're not paying for those services that the municipality that surrounds them is providing, whether that be street repair, snow removal, in some cases water. In some situations we have unincorporated islands that are double feed for the water that they use. Other areas we have contracts where we are providing the services through another entity, but it's still Ogden City that's providing those services. So that's why this process was developed in state law, to make sure that there's equity between all the property owners, those who are paying for the services they're receiving, and those who may be receiving the services but are not paying the same taxes that their neighbors are in receiving those services. There are two options in annexation. The one Glenn had mentioned earlier regarding one piece of property, and that is if they've been receiving services for over a year, the city could do an annexation consideration. The second is the one we're considering tonight, and that is that state law has said that if the county makes a recommendation to a given city, they can consider annexations of those properties, because the county has determined that they cannot efficiently provide services to those properties, and that the local communities would be better equipped to do that. So in September and November of 2017, Weber County made a declaration to several communities, Ogden being one of those, of areas of developed islands that should be incorporated into those communities. In Ogden, that relates to 7 specific islands. And so your consideration tonight is dealing with those 7 islands, and should they be annexed in, because we do provide services to them. There's nothing to require them to be annexed any other way, and to create an equity in services and in fees to annex them in. Now, whenever an annexation is discussed, there's a concern by the owners of property. One is taxes. Ogden City does have a higher tax rate than unincorporated Weber County. And even though some entities would be taken off the tax bill that are presently on the Weber County taxes. It does change the rate by 0.001869 of taxation based on the valuation of the property. There'd also be a utility fee increase that would take place. In some instances, I said people are being double feed for water. They would actually see a decrease. Their water bill would be cut in half. Others would expect an increase, going from Bona Vista or Weber Basin. There'd be another tax increase with that. On the other hand, like I said, it is trying to create an equity for all the neighbors who may be in the city and the one or two properties that may not be, who are receiving all the same benefits. So I'm going to skip this because that is already discussed, so we'll talk about the 7 islands. So in the county's recommendation to you of considering annexing these 7 islands, this map shows the distribution of those areas. All but one of them are located west of Pennsylvania Avenue and between Exchange Road and Hinckley Drive. And we're going to talk about each one of those specific islands. When the county recommended this to the city, they had made this determination that these areas can be more effectively serviced by the city. These properties would not likely be annexed because they would not create urban development because they're already developed. And by annexing these properties, they would remove an overlap of government services that take place, whether it be police response, fire protection, road maintenance, those type of things. And it would result in an equitable distribution of community resources. Those are the findings the county made in making this recommendation to the city. When the Planning Commission looked at the possible zoning, they looked at the consistency with the general plan, the consistency with the zoning language, and used these 4 principles to try to recommend zoning that would both reflect the character of the area, set edges to development, make sure the zones are similar to what was in the county and what is in the city, and then make sure they don't cut across individual property lines, but try to have logical sequences to the zoning. So the first area for consideration, the county defines as Area A. This area, as is outlined on this map, which is our declaration of where we could go, is consistent with our plans. Area A takes in property that's along 2550, takes in the Scholar property, also takes in some properties along Exchange Road, and uses the railroads as connections between those islands. In this area, the Planning Commission recommended a couple of zoning options here. There's a piece or pieces of property that are on the north side of the Weber River. They're in a floodplain and they're not accessible by any means. There's no roads that service that area, and Planning Commission recommended that area, which is in the floodplain and can't be accessed, to be zoned O1. The other areas, there's several homes along 2550. One of the concerns the Commission had is they did not want to make properties non-conforming. They wanted to make sure that the uses there are allowed in the zone. In the county, homes are permitted use in the manufacturing zone. In the city, they're not. And given these few homes, these 4 homes that are clustered along 2550, the Planning Commission thought it would be more appropriate to zone it R110 so they wouldn't create a nonconformity to the homes. The other properties that are in Island A, the Planning Commission is recommending they be zoned M2, similar to the zoning that's around them in Ogden City, and that's our highest industrial zone. It allows the most uses. And so that would be their recommendation regarding Island A. Island B is a 32-acre area of property that goes from Midland Drive to Hinckley, and it incorporates 8 homes that are between Midland and the railroad tracks, and then from the railroad tracks to 3300 and from 3300 to Hinckley involves industrial properties. In the Planning Commission's recommendation on these properties, they felt to be appropriate to rezone the area that has residential use on it, residential at the present time. knowing that in the future transition would take place, both in terms of a new Midland Drive alignment, but at the present time feeling that as development takes place around, it'd be appropriate to have some buffers, which the R110 could provide. They then recommended that the rest of the properties be zoned M2 from the railroad track south. Now, there was some discussion in the Planning Commission regarding one property, Mr. Hensley's, that is a home, but he also wants to be able to use that to do auto repair and auto, tinkering with cars and to upgrade and sell them. And his concern was that both with the future Midland Drive, which you see in that dash green on the photo, what that would do in the future to his property, and of course the property to the south, and the rest of the areas. The Planning Commission discussed this and felt that the area between the tracks and Midlands should be rezoned residential, and made the recommendation, even with Mr. Hensley's property, to zone it residential. What was not discussed was a piece of property that is right on Midland Drive. It used to have a home on it. That home was torn down a few years ago, and now is vacant property. When the commission made their recommendations, they were looking at the overall character of the area. Recently, that property has changed hands, and the person buying it has bought it for industrial purpose because it is vacant ground. Contrary to the Planning Commission recommendation, staff is recommending that piece, because it is vacant, and knowing the future area is transitioning to manufacturing, there's no nonconformity to protect because it is vacant ground. We'd recommend that those two parcels that are in one ownership be zoned M2, and that's contrary to what the Planning Commission had recommended, because this discussion and a developer and buyer of that property was working on plans which we were unaware of when this hearing took place with the Planning Commission.
Greg, on that film slide, it shows the future Midland Drive. If that doesn't develop, does that change the zoning at all?
No. No, we'd still see the overall area industrial, and then as Midland Drive takes place, those homes may change. And at that point, we'd consider, based on the general plan, other rezoning for those properties. But the intent of the Planning Commission's action was not to make the homes non-conforming.
Okay. Because there is a possibility that Midland Drive may not go there.
Midland Drive is all connected to the 24th Street interchange. If the 24th Street interchange happens, Midland Drive will happen. Island C is a 34-acre section of property, and this is along 1900 West, a portion of Midland Drive, and 3300 South. In this recommendation, it's recommended the property be zoned M1, except for a piece of property which is in the Giles subdivision. All the lots in the Giles subdivision are zoned M2. There's only one lot that's not in the city. And the zoning policies of saying keeping the zoning similar across the local street would dictate that piece be M2 rather than M1 as the rest of the area, because the Giles subdivision is zoned M2. And that is that area for recommendation. Island D is a 33.7 acre area. This is Jetway, or we always refer to it as Jetway, plus properties that extend between 3300 and Hinckley Drive that are all developed. So this is a completely developed area, and the zoning recommendation north of 3300 is M2, but south of 3300 would be M1. The M1 zoning is because of Hinckley Drive and the need to make sure we protect the character of that area, especially what's around the airport, and not have some of the more intense uses the M2 could allow. But all the uses proposed or existing in that area now would fit under the M1 zoning. Island E is an area that is out in the southeast Ogden section of the city along Old Post Road. There are two property owners here, home on each side of Old Post Road. And the recommendation here is to zone it R110, which is consistent with the zoning that is in the rest of Ogden City in that area. Island F is a strip of land owned by both UDOT and the railroad. And for some reason, the county felt that we would be the appropriate people to have that little island. It didn't appear in our annexation declaration, but with that recommendation to kind of fill in those islands, we're recommending we go ahead and look at annexing this property and zone it M1, again, to protect the area around the airport. And Island G is one parcel of property, a home on this piece of property surrounded by manufacturing M2 zoning. The recommendation here is to also rezone that one parcel M2. So these are the 7 islands for your consideration with their appropriate zoning the Planning Commission is recommending to you. Any questions you may have of me? Or
Is there a home on that G?
there is.
So how does that affect them?
In this situation, the concern was there's not a neighborhood, enough of a neighborhood to say let's zone this residential. It would still be allowed to continue as a grandfathered right, but with it being surrounded by manufacturing, it was felt that over time the transition would be there, and it's just one parcel.
So if they sold it, would it still stay that?
It
or
could
what?
still be used. The grandfathering right runs with the property, and so it's not with the owner. So they could sell that, and someone else could still buy it and use it as a home, or else they could determine to take it down and expand manufacturing uses. So it gives that either option, but it would, as a non-conforming, if they wanted to expand the home, there would be a process they'd have to go through to review whether the expansion should take place as a home. But it would allow it to continue as a home.
I have 2 questions, or maybe just clarifications. On the property that you recommended M2 on, that the Planning Commission submitted residential. Now, I think you said this, I just wanted to make sure that it's highlighted, that the Planning Commission had different information when they made their recommendation than was the actual fact.
Correct.
So,
but there was and that information was there was a process already involved with Weber County to lead them to developing the property as manufacturing.
And the second was that thin piece of property between the airport road and the freeway. That's quite a sloped piece of property, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of like almost vertical. Is that accurate?
Well, where the railroad is, it's flat. But yeah, it's on a hillside.
Is there, I question why M1 rather than just O1.
Because the transportation uses aren't allowed in O1 zoning.
Okay. All right. Good enough for me. Any other questions for Mr.
I
Montgomery?
have a question, and this is just, it was a lot of information, and I really appreciate you going into such depth for the second time, and I apologize that I haven't caught everything. So I just want to clarify the protocol. I think that you were kind of talking about it, but of us kind of changing what the Planning Commission's recommendation is, is it appropriate for us to go ahead and do that without sending it back to them?
Yes, I mean, the final decision on any zoning is left with the council. The commission gives you a recommendation based on what they have at that point. And so we feel, given the new factors, it doesn't alter really what the commission was trying to accomplish.
Mayor Heyer?
Yes.
Clarification. So thanks for the presentation, and you clarified greatly Mr. Hensley's concerns and how we have accommodated in preparation for his concerns and our findings. We've proposed potential revised adoption language. So if you're going to make a motion one way or another on this item, this is just a point of clarification for procedure. The language that we have has the 2 property numbers listed, and one of the property numbers is wrong. We have 15-101-0016. Or sorry, dash.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's the second one.
And we have 2.5.
Yeah, we have 0025 in our language. So if anybody's going to make a proposal to pass or to adopt or not adopt this ordinance before we get to that point. Make sure that your motion includes 0024 in the motion, not 0025 as is in our language. Yes, we've clarified 0024 is the correct property ID. Is that?
The two contiguous properties that face Midland, they're on Midland.
Hopefully I didn't make that more messy than it is, but.
Absolutely you did.
So 0024, not 0025. Okay.
Better to be right, though, than.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have a question. I've been looking through the public feedback. I see a lot of public here today, but in our records, I only see feedback from Mr. Hensley, which you've addressed, and from Mrs. King, which I think we've heard from. I haven't heard from anybody else. Am I correct?
We haven't.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to know for sure before we hear the public comment.
Well, I should make mention, and I think in the report we talked about, in the open house, Mr. Jensen had discussed his properties, but during the actual hearings, he didn't make a comment. But
can you remind me what feedback the county commission received when they considered this item?
So when the county commission looked at this, they addressed issues that dealt with an item you're going to deal with later on about sewer connection. One of the concerns that was expressed in the county hearings was if annexation took place in Ogden City, they'd require these properties to connect to the sewer. And that is a cost that the property owners had not anticipated and felt that that would be a burden to them. We had an investigation, got back with the county and recommended changes to our ordinance, which you'll consider tonight, that these properties would not need to connect to the sewer, only if there's a couple criteria, and that'll be addressed, septic tank fails or within 5 feet of the sewer line, those type of things. But we would, upon annexation, not require any sewer connections of these properties.
Okay, but none of that comment related to item 5D on our agenda tonight. 5D. 6A, yes. 5D, no.
Correct.
5-2?
Does to me.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Montgomery? I think as we, and I'm just going to say this, I think from my perspective and maybe other council members that as we listen to public input tonight, I think the thing that is the most important for me to hear is if there was some, the proposal is to exclude you from this annexation, is why it's going to be a hurdle for me to impose your share of city services on the rest of the citizens of the city to keep you from having to do so. So if you want to address that, that I think is an important thing that council members will want to hear from people that don't want to be annexed. So thank you, Mr. Montgomery. So this is also a public hearing, and so we'd like to hear from citizens who'd like to address the council. Please give us your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Okay, my name's Gary Kapp, and I'm for it. And I'm going to tell you why real quick. I did an industrial park years ago, and we had to annex into the city because we didn't have the correct fire flow. But in the middle of my industrial park, there's 4 houses, and I own 2 of them, and I rent them out. And this is the issue that I've even talked to Greg Montgomery about a little bit. There's been issues when we've had to call the police department, and they couldn't figure out if we were in the county or the city, and even the fire department, because of this little island that sits there. And Bonavista builds the houses, but Ogden City provides the water, and apparently they have a contract for Bonavista to keep building it, even though I know there's a new Ogden City water line in there because I put it in a few years ago, okay? And so that's another goofy thing. I guess it'd have to be worked out on taxes. And about a month and a half ago, we had a water leak out on 33rd. So we called Bonavista because they're the ones that bill it. They said, no, you got to call Ogden City because they own the line. And as it was, Ogden City came out and fixed it. So I don't need to stay any longer. I mean, I hope you annex my pieces in, and I think I'm in C. I think I'm in C right on 33rd. So that's my comments, and I beat 3 minutes.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Please come forward.
My name's Ed Sarver, and I'm one of the two landowners there in Island E, what's known as Island. It's, I think, more likely a peninsula. But at any rate, I receive absolutely no services from Ogden City at all. In fact, when the police come out, sometimes people go by on the weekends and throw safes and things like that on the ground, and so I'll call the police about that. Ogden City, they come up now, they've got their computers there. They look and they say, "Oh, you're not in Ogden City. Call the sheriff." So I call the sheriff, and the sheriff says, "Hey, always call us." He says, "It's all Weber County. We'll come no matter what." So I have my own water. I have my own septic tanks. I've got 4 acres there. I've had horses and had a horse operation, although I'm not currently running horses, but may return to that. So I have concerns about that, and if we're going to talk about fairness here, I mean, the fairness is not to have me pay for services I don't get. And have regulations that aren't going to conform really with what I'm doing there. I've been there 36 years. So anyway, that's what I had to say.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Robert Anderson, and I live at I own the properties 1174 West, 1190 West on 2550 South, and we're in the same boat too. We don't receive services from Ogden City at all. No police, and the water, as everybody knows here, deals with Buena Vista and Ogden City. They're like marrying your sister, just who bills you. So that's not an issue, is it? Is it? I don't believe
We'll get
it
you
is.
some answers when all the questions are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't believe it's an issue, that the water thing, but we pay for our own sewer with the septic tank. We pay county taxes for that septic tank and our own garbage pickup also. And we're actually closer to Weber County sheriffs than we are Ogden City police, So, and what else? Oh, besides that, shortly we're going to be, hopefully, we're all hoping for this, is that they take our property for the off-ramp there for 2550. So that's another reason we don't want to really be brought into the city. And there's one more thing. Last time we got signed up with the city water, they really put the spurs to everybody on 2550. And we finally complained so much to Buena Vista about how Ogden City, rode hard on us with their fees and everything, that they Buena Vista finally took us back. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Vern Perry. I own 2 properties out on 2550 South, 1312 West. Let me just say, Mr. Anderson's, yes, when Buena Vista made a contract with Ogden City, and then Ogden City backed out, and Ogden City went ahead and connected all of us, and then all of a sudden, when they got us connected, they put door knockers on our doors that we needed. We had 7 days to open an account with Ogden City, or our water would be shut off. 6 months later, we still hadn't got a bill. And Ogden City kept saying, well, the gal is on vacation. Well, it takes a while for her to get into the computer. When we did get the bill, some of the residents out there got a $400 bill. That was when I contacted Buena Vista, and they went back and finally had to get with the city attorney to do a contract on the water. Now, we don't have sewer, we don't have the storm drain. You're using Ogden City, actually it's a state road. 2550 is the state road, am I correct? It is. The state road uses our ditch along the road as a storm drain. We take care of all the water runs off the state road. On your website, you're saying that the property taxes will go up 14% over what we're paying at the county. And I'm afraid that the city has found a way that if they annex everybody, this is a windfall for money without having to put out any, because you're not going to come out and put curb and gutter down the street. It's going to cost us to have the garbage collection, and it's going to cost us if you require us to hook up to the sewer, which can be as much as $10,000 a connection. So I'm opposed to this. I would suggest that instead of just taking a broad brush and annexing all these people, why not wait till the properties change hands and then require the new owners automatically, it comes into the Ogden City. I think that'd be a fair and equitable solution rather than just bully your way in and make us conform. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, Leland Ashelman. I'm at 820 West, 2150 South. And I have a couple questions for Mr. Montgomery. I was unclear on our property whether exactly it's going to be in there. I understand you guys' situation and your position. I do. But I understand everybody else's. But I'm unclear on the zoning that my property will be. It's at 820 West, right by the Weber River, right across from the transfer station. Mr. Montgomery, could you?
Go ahead and just
somebody?
ask your questions, and then he'll have a chance to address everybody's concerns and questions.
We are
when you're
compiling
done.
all of the questions. Yep. So.
Okay. All right. That's my biggest thing. And then is there going to be I'm not the cleanest place there. And in fact, I have a rental there and they're not the cleanest people. Is there going to be some kind of where you come in and start telling me, well, this has got to be cleaned up, or this has got to be like the door knocker on your door or something? Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else?
My name is Eric Johnson, and I live in Section B there, the very end of the road of 3100 South. I happen to be the one that when they bring the New Midland Drive in, I go away. So I guess if that happens, it's going to change everything then. But one of the concerns I have with it'd be 3100 South, and then there's a kind of another road, and I'm not for sure on that. The next road there is parallels with it. They keep telling us that is a private road. And now, currently, the county comes in 2 or 3 times a year. They grade it for us. It's a dirt road. It's not like 2550 where it's a paved road and they already have maintenance there. They're calling this a private road, but the county comes in, they plow it for us, or they grade it for us. They've done, so far they've plowed for us. I do have a plow truck, so I do it when they don't. But one of the concerns there is you guys are saying, well, at least this is the way it's come back to me, is that you guys are not going to be accountable for the maintenance of that road, because after all, it's a private road. But now all of a sudden we're paying these higher taxes. We're doing all this other stuff. Well, give us some, we got 5 houses, I believe, on that. So who is going to pay for that? This is a problem that we're going to have to address, because who is going to pay for the maintenance of that dirt road? Or do we just go from, everybody will have to lock in their hubs when they go down the road? Currently, Weber County takes care of that, and then they help us with that, if that's a question that we can address on those two possible roads for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sherry Anderson, and I own the properties with Robert Anderson at 1190 West and 1174. When I bought those properties, I wanted to make sure that they were in Weber County, because I had a son that I wanted to go to Weber County schools. So Ogden City created my island. I mean, the halfway house that went on the other side of the freeway in back of me, that was Ogden City. And then slowly, pretty soon, Ogden City was all around me through no fault of my own. So now, after 35, 40 years, now you're going to come back and annex me into the city where I didn't want to be, and then charge me to hook up to a sewer, higher waters, higher. I've already run the gambit with Ogden City about, I used to get letters all the time. Your yard better be cleaned up, or else, you be down here and pay this fine. And, I'd call up, sorry, I'm not Ogden City. Yes, you are. Check your map. Check your plat map. I'm not. I've already run that. I don't want to do that again. So if I have a vote, which I'm sure I don't want to be annexed. Thanks.
Thank you.
John Francis. I own the property at 1505 West, 3300 South. A lot of the folks, they've got their belly aches, and legitimate. Me, myself, I'm all for it. Currently, I'm hooked up to a septic system, the annexation, the regulations that the Ogden City has as far as our ordinances go. Hey, I'll hook up to the city sewer, waive the fee to hook up for me. Another issue is on 1500 West, there's bushes, trees, and everything else. Well, there's no irrigation there. It doesn't work. I've been tending to that since we acquired the property. With the water's going to be a problem for everybody, because we're just going to get soaked for the use of the water, or the amount of water we're going to use, from what I understand and heard and seen. That's pretty much it. I'm for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Francis. Anyone else? Okay, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second. We have a motion by Vice Chair Nadolski, seconded by Councilmember Lopez, to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Well, let's see if we can't get some answers from Mr. Montgomery. Hope you were taking copious notes.
Well, hopefully I've captured the comments that have been made. First of all, we'll go to Old Post Road property. And as was mentioned, the properties, the two homes, one on each side of Old Post Road, they are on wells, septic tank. They really do not receive any services from the city but the snowplow that goes along Old Post Road in the wintertime. And so the utility lines are a distance away from this home, so as far as any water. I know there's been discussions several times, as there were problems with the wells and that of hooking into the water. And there is a long distance to try to connect to these properties. So his comments really are correct, that the only service that does take place at this time is the snowplow on Old Post Road as it doesn't pull with the blade and stop, it continues on through. But all other services are really independent.
What will happen with fire and police?
So they're covered presently by an interlocal agreement, and it's kind of the first responders between South Ogden and Ogden City, of however that agreement works and who's responding first to that. What this does do is it gets rid of that ambiguous section. And while he's correct in that the services are not really there for him, other than that the road's there, that's really all. We don't have plans in the future for extending the water line in that area. More development would need to happen, and with that little valley there off of the creek, it's and some of the geologic problems, I don't know how much development will really happen there. So I mean, there is a concern there. Not all utilities are provided, but that is on that piece of those two pieces. That's the situation. The concerns about 2550 of this few people who had expressed and have different properties along 2550. 2550 is a city road. It's not a state road. And so the city does maintain that road. So all the access that they have in and off of 2550 is a city service that takes place. As I understand it, there was at the conversion of the agreements with Bonavista and Ogden City, and I'm not privy to all the information, but I understand there was a lot of misconception on the city's part. And
Greg, can I interrupt you there for a minute?
You want to go ahead and talk about that?
Why don't you address the other questions? I think I can probably address the Bonavista service maybe better.
Okay, that sounds fine with me. So he'll talk about that part. Mr. Johnson and the 3100 South and the other street, let me just kind of go to that. So these are there's two roads. There's 5 homes on one road and 3 homes on another road. They are, as you look at that county plat, you see there is no road shown on that county plat of those ownerships on the right-hand side. And so it is a lane that the people have in common. The city would not service that because it's not a dedicated street. It has no ownerships other than the private individual owners. If the county has been doing those things, they've been doing a service to those people. But where it's not a city street owned and dedicated by the city, just like private streets, we don't service private streets, nor would we service these. So that is an area that may be different from what the county's been doing. But that is where that would be. We wouldn't service those streets.
Are all of these situations the same for fire?
The fire, as far as the interlocal
There's
agreements?
a fire, yeah, is it all interlocal agreements?
Yeah. And generally, it's Ogden City that would be the first responders to those areas.
Same way with police?
And with police.
At least in an emergency scenario.
Uh-huh. Right.
No one's taking a call and looking at the property and saying, are you in or out of the city? Sorry, you're out, we're not coming. Is that?
Well, through dispatch, they'd probably be looking at those type of things, but with the interlocal agreement of first responder, if we are closest, we would still respond first to it. But you may get on some items that aren't emergency, where it says, okay, this is more Weaver County than Ogden City, where if it's in the city, it's always the city that's responding, not a discussion of whose is this. Again, Midland Drive is city maintained, and all these properties exit out onto Midland Drive. So again, while it may not be a direct service for that individual lot, but to be able to get it out of that lot is a direct service from the city with Midland Drive and its maintenance and improvements that take place. Let's see. And I think the rest of the discussions were really more about the water and what had taken place at that earlier on. I don't think I'm missing anything else that was discussed.
Well,
Chair,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
if I can take a minute to address the
Yes,
Bonavista
please.
issue.
Mr. Stratford.
So about 10 or 11 years ago, Ogden City invested some very significant sums of money to improve and replace water lines throughout all of this area between 1900 West and almost over the freeway. All of the streets over there practically got brand new water lines. And at that time, Ogden City and Bonavista had essentially parallel networks. There were lines in the roads for both entities. And Bonavista's lines were getting older and were not weren't able to deliver the pressure, is my understanding, to homes there, and were in some need of probably replacement. And as they looked at the investment that Ogden City was putting into all of these brand new lines, there was a question about, well, what really is this? You know, if Ogden City puts in all of these new lines, what's the benefit of Bonavista essentially going in, especially when half or more of the services were already in Ogden City, and so Bonavista was looking at the potential of having to pay a bunch of money to install lines that didn't really service both sides of the street and didn't service people up and down the street because of the way that this was already chopped up, which actually illustrates part of the problem with how this went over time as portions got annexed into Ogden City and started receiving Ogden City services, and then it creates this kind of patchwork quilt. And so there was an understanding at that point that no, Bonavista wouldn't need to install the lines. Ogden City would allow those existing Bonavista services to connect into the city system. And unfortunately at that time, it was kind of, it was informal. It was, there was no formal action taken at that time to adjust the boundaries of the Bonavista Service District with Ogden City service. And there was also, unfortunately, a little bit of a misunderstanding about how billing would work for those places, because Ogden City has an ordinance that requires people who receive city water but are not within the city boundaries to pay double the rate of an in-city resident. And so what happened, as has been illustrated, is that Ogden City said, okay, we'll connect these up, and then Ogden City started sending bills to people. And those bills were not only higher than Bonavista because the Ogden City service is more expensive, but then they were doubled on top of that because of that ordinance. And it became immediately clear, really immediately clear, that that wasn't working. So the city and Bonavista agreed to essentially a temporary resolution, which was that Bonavista would continue to bill until such time as an annexation happened. And Ogden City has a separate contract with Bonavista to provide water to the district, really on the north end of Harrison Boulevard is where we meter that. But the agreement was, okay, for this interim time period, we don't want to see people get double billed, so we will just deduct the usage of the people in West Ogden from the contract that applied to Harrison Boulevard. And that was a way to recognize that. But in reality, all of the improvements that have been out there that were received, the new water lines, the improved pressure, kind of the ability to have fire flows, all of that stuff, have not really been paid for by anybody who's on Bonavista's, because they're just riding along on this other contract. And so the intent of that was really a short-term answer to not have to double bill people. And I don't know what happened before 10 years, if there was different arrangements that were promised 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, but within the last 10 years, that's really the evolution of what happened with Ogden City and Bonavista. If this action goes through, there's a separate action that will need to take place. Right now, all of those properties are billed by Bonavista, or excuse me, are taxed by Bonavista. And if this annexation happens, then all of those properties will then be required to sign service agreements with Ogden City and pay the regular city rate, which is more expensive than Bonavista, but it's not the double rate. But there will be a separate action that the city and Bonavista will need to take to remove the Bonavista tax, so that you're not being taxed by Bonavista for services that you're not at all receiving from them. But that's a subsequent action. Two other items I think that were addressed that I did want to refer to. First of all, this action has no effect on school district boundaries. There is no automatic change between Weaver School District and Ogden School District when this annexation happens. If there's any change to the boundaries, that will be the result of any kind of actions taken by the individual school districts, and there's no automatic change here. So if there are children in this area that are going to Weaver School District, they'll still go to Weaver School District, and that will stay the same. And then finally, in response to I think it was Mr. Perry who asked, anyway, about waiting for new owners to come along before an annexation happens. Again, that's the reason why the county went through this process, because there's no trigger when somebody buys a piece of property to identify that and do an annexation right at that time. And so that's why the county went through the process they went through and why they made the recommendation. Because honestly, what has happened over time is as these other areas have developed and have come into Ogden City, the city could have probably taken a more aggressive approach and said, hey, you need to bring everybody in your neighborhood in along with you as you develop these 10 acres or 15 acres or 20 acres. But the city did not do that. The city just said, okay, you're going to develop, we'll take you. You're going to develop, we'll take you, which fortunately or unfortunately left a lot of these islands in place. And that would just perpetuate that problem to try and bring them in one at a time, which is why the county made the recommendation, or part of the reason at least why the county made the recommendation they did.
Mr. Stratford, is there I have some recollection that there's some state law that asks communities to eliminate unincorporated islands. Is that my imagination, or?
Well, I don't know that there's a mandate that says that you need to do that, but certainly state law is written in a way that, and Mr. Montgomery might be able to address this, that anticipates that as development changes over time, that will be accommodated through city services and not really through county services.
And another question that I think was asked, is there going to be a impact fee for connection to city services as they desire to?
There are connection fees both for water and for sewer. For the water situation, because the meters, Ogden City and Bonavista work together on the meters, I actually don't believe there will be any connection fees for water because they'll just transfer those meters to us. On the sewer side, I don't know that there's been any discussion about waiver of the sewer connection fee.
But I think it is important to make mention that one of the things we're looking at with this is the revision in the next item you look at, that sewer connection would not be required for these properties. Right. It would be annexed in. They would not be required to connect to the sewer because, again, they're not the ones asking for this to begin with. And so we felt it would be inappropriate to now require them to connect to the sewer. The proposed regulation you look at will say if certain events happen in the future, if their septic tank fails, or if a new sewer line is installed right to their property line, then at that time they may be looking at connections, but this would not trigger any connections to the sewer line. There was one other item I realized I didn't address, and that was the question on Exchange Road. And that area, you see where the green is, where the Weber River is. Well, the gentleman who has property along there, it's on 2100, that would be zoned M2, which is presently what the zoning is in the county. So he's right across from the transfer station. And that would be M2 zoning. That's our recommendation for his property, and that's presently what is zoned in the county also.
Okay. Councilmember White also has some questions. Councilmember White, are you there?
Yep, going to try this. So there was also another question regarding the expansion of, I want to say 2550 or something. What do we know about the expansion of any roads or, you said exchanges or something? I apologize. I'm trying to write things down.
Yeah, what that is referring to is the state, as they're looking to make a full interchange at 24th Street. That interchange will happen with 2550 also, and so as they develop that full interchange, there will be reconfigurations and new on-off ramps. And so that probably would involve some of those properties that are on 2550 at the present time. So that is what's being talked about, is the state has put this on the list to be funded. I think partially funded already. So you're looking at a 4 or 5 year time frame, I think.
Greg, I had a question on that also, and I believe it was Mr. Anderson that brought that up. Why, or does that matter if they are annexed in or not annexed in with the expansion of 2550 and
why it's a concern to the city is, and again the reason why this whole provision is out there, is that with these unincorporated islands that are all developed, there is nothing to trigger them to annex into the city. They're developed, they'd have no need for anything else. And the way the county had put this together with these islands, if you exclude a portion of it, you can exclude the whole thing. So those pieces that may not be affected by the interchange, if you decide not to annex, those also will not be annexed, and they'll still remain islands. And even though the interchange may take place, those properties that are further to the west will then continue to remain islands, as well as Exchange Road.
I have a quick question. Mr. Montgomery, did anyone from your office reached out to these community members to talk about this?
Well, we had an open house and invited people to that open house, and that's where Mr. Jensen came. Not this Mr. Jensen, but Mr. Jensen who's on Midland Drive. But no one else.
So how were they notified about the open house?
We sent mailings with an explanation of all the events that are taking place, and then we had the open house, and then we had that before the Planning Commission's review of recommendations, and this was back a couple months ago.
And the county, when they did their process, they notified and had public hearings also. One other comment that I think ought to be made is that the county pursued this not only in our city but in some other cities, and it's because they were struggling to be able to provide services to these islands. And so their action, I mean, the county was they worked really hard to get the legislation passed, and they're the ones who have kind of pushed the envelope. And there's some in the city of Roy, there's some in other cities that they looked at and said, we're struggling to be able to provide the services to these islands. And they're the ones who have kind of pushed the envelope on these properties. We think it's a good idea in most cases, but it came as a result of the county's feeling that they just can't, there's just too many of these islands for them to be able to help.
Mr. Johnson, I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Councilmember White.
Is there a timing issue as far as when they need to have this completed by? The county or the state?
That's probably a Mr. Stratford question.
There's nothing specific in the state statute that directs exactly when this needs to happen.
Okay, Councilmember Lopez.
Just a follow-up comment. I see citizens that are here that I feel a little bit of frustration when I ask about if they were reached out to. They're raising their hands saying they didn't think that happened. I understand that notices went out. I know that happens. I know how that works. But I personally, I'm just speaking for me, have many times expressed a desire for better citizen engagement, better outreach when these things take place, because if we were able to connect with these citizens on a different environment, then what's happening here probably wouldn't be happening. So I feel like this setting is not conducive to have a really good discussion and dialogue with these citizens, even if it doesn't go in their favor. But and this is not directed at you, Mr. Montgomery, or anyone. I'm just kind of venting these out as it's something that I feel I need to say. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a quick question. I know we talked about this in the work session as well, but do we have a sense, or do we know how many people are currently paying double for their water? Because I know some people are very concerned about their water, but we talked about how some people are actually going to save money from this annexation because they'll then only be paying one entity.
I don't know that we have an exact number. I know Cash Commodities which is not being discussed tonight. Jetway is paying double. I think Scholar is paying double.
I think all of the double fees are businesses. I don't know
Businesses,
that
not
they're.
these residents. Okay, that's good to know.
I have one
Yes,
question,
or whatever.
and I would like to thank Mr. Stratford for that in-depth Ogden City Bonavista Vista dilemma. So here's my two comments so far. Some of the residents had concerns about the sewer being forced to connect to the sewer. And I believe that shouldn't be an issue because we're going to address that with the next item, correct? So that should be taken care of. The other thing, and maybe I missed this in earlier meetings, but I was unaware that if this happens, that we then, this board body, would have to go along and take another step to then remove these people from Bonavista. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That doesn't happen automatically. So special districts are created. They have boundaries, just like cities have boundaries. And in order for those boundaries to be modified, there has to be some action. Now, in this case, that's called a boundary adjustment, where Bonavista pushes its boundary to 1900 in recognition of the fact that that the property's been annexed into Ogden City. So yeah, it's a set. But the thing is, you don't have authority to do that all by yourself. You can't do that tonight because Bonavista has to be kind of a joint action between the city and the district to make that happen.
Okay, that was my question, is could we do that along with an annexation?
Yeah, and for other reference, the taxes won't change this year. You will, if the annexation happens tonight, in 2018, you will not pay taxes to Ogden City. You won't do that until 2019. And so there's time for that to happen before the taxation happens next year in 2019.
Okay. That helps me.
The question I have is, in our next segment, would that be the time to talk about whether we would want to waive the fees for sewer connections? Or would it be another date?
That's a good question.
That would probably be another date. Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be some background work has to be done, I'm sure. So in order to make that happen, and we could initiate that from the council.
I think it should be a topic that we should review to take a look at.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Okay.
I have a comment.
Yes, Vice Chairman.
Actually, one before you sit down. There was one.
You're not done yet.
There was a question asked that wasn't answered, and then I have a comment. The question by the gentleman that asked about the messy properties.
Oh, code enforcement. What happens there?
Well, I think there's two things. One is city regulations do have certain standards to it. And so it would be expected as code enforcement receives complaints that they would act on those complaints based on what the regulations are. The same is true for the county. And I think what the real question is, the county doesn't enforce it, so we'd like the city not to enforce theirs either. I mean, I think that's the bottom line. We don't go out actively seeking it. We work on complaint basis, but we would follow our ordinances.
That's your question?
Well, it wasn't my question, but wanted to make sure it was answered. Thank you. So my comment, and I'm kind of tagging on to Councilmember Lopez. Early on in this process, this has been a pretty long process because of the requirements for noticing and so on. I remember having initial hesitancy with this, and I think I remarked in our work session that, okay, if we go down this road, this is going to require a lot of outreach and engagement. And I think that's why you had an open house. That's why you've done mailings and so on. But and this is no fault of you, it's the situation that we're in, especially as it relates to planning items. And I've learned why we're in this situation. It's an industry-wide scenario, really. It happens a lot. But I keep growing frustrated that we don't have this means of interacting with people besides this. And this setting is really difficult to interact with folks. And now what I'm hearing is I'm hearing from folks that are neighborhood divided here. There are some people that want this, and I want them to have the services they want. I don't want to turn this down because some people are unclear. But I think the folks that are against this have some legitimate concerns that have put them against this proposal, but there are some things that maybe more communication might help clarify and ease some of the concerns that they have too. So I'm kind of torn when we initially were presented with this, when we received the transmittal, I remember being concerned about it, but I was not concerned as it continued on because we'd only heard from very few folks. 3 to be exact. Mm-hmm. And none of them are here to speak because I think that their concerns were allayed as they interacted with us. And I would hope that if we could interact with the folks that are opposed to it tonight, maybe I'm not saying it would, but maybe some of their concerns would be allayed as well. But now here we are, forced to make a decision to either, sorry, we know more, therefore we'll pass it, or sorry to those that want the services, we deny it. I really wish we could have more time. I'm considering a motion to extend with the request that you reach out to these folks and get more to help resolve some of these concerns that they might have, and then bring it back to us. And if it doesn't resolve them, then we've got a decision to make. But in the chance that it does, I'd sure like to take that chance. It would only be a request that you do so. You don't work for me, obviously. But we could direct our staff to help answer questions too. We have a planner on our staff as well, if that would help. But
So would this be a one-on-one interview, Ben?
What's
Would
that?
this be a one-on-one interview between Ogden City and these residents here?
Well, it wouldn't be an interview. It would be an opportunity to talk one-on-one and get to the specifics of the concerns and have a better opportunity to have a conversation that's more difficult to have here.
That's why we had the open house, so we could have that conversation.
We're hearing that folks aren't.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an issue that I've been hearing from different groups and I know that we try our best to have open forums and have connection with people, but people cannot always show up on a particular night or day at a particular time and place, and so then they're coming here instead to give their feedback, and I think that is too bad. You know, it's too bad that we can't schedule around that. So I think one way of allaying that is listening to people and getting feedback when they are available versus them coming to us on our schedule.
This is probably a question for Mark. An extension, there are specific notification requirements on this proposal that are different than your standard proposal, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, at the very beginning, there was a notice of intent that had to set this public hearing that had specific notices associated with it, you know, that are different than we do with other kinds of things. So yeah, that's the case. I mean, if you choose to table it, I think I would generally suggest that you probably close the public hearing and then table it if that's your inclination. But you could probably do that. I will say that the letter that the planning department sent out was much more extensive than a postcard. It was probably 3 or 4 pages long, and it included a specific email and phone number contact for people to reach out to. Now, if they didn't get the letter, I don't know about that, but this was not a here's a postcard and 3x5. It was a multi-page letter that explained most of the issues that we've talked about tonight.
Then there's also a website that was produced by the council staff that again addressed the same things and provided opportunities for people to feedback off that website.
Mr. Stratford reminds us of a point of order. We are still having an open public hearing, and
I think we closed it.
Did we close it? Okay.
Yeah, it is closed. Mm-hmm.
I did. Yeah, you're okay. Thanks. So then I'll ask my last question regarding notice. If we extend this or delay it to a time certain, date certain, would we have to restart that entire notification process, or would we just re-notify that we extended? When we do agendize it, do we notify again? How does that work?
So maybe I can take a stab. So when we wrote the option in your norms and rules to extend something, that was specifically to avoid a date certain, because sometimes we don't know what needs to be done. And so we can do whatever you would like us to do if you extend. One of the rules in there is that if you choose to extend and give us direction on what to do, we come back to you. It says within the next week or as quickly as we can. We come back with a communications plan that gives us a couple of days to figure out what we need to do and to kind of scope out our own timeline, and we come back and we present that to you for your approval. So that's a quick turnaround time for what we need to do as far as communications. So that's a piece of it.
Thanks, Glenn.
Chair, may I speak?
Please.
But you always have the option of continuing to a date certain, and I'm wondering from a procedural standpoint if that might be sufficient if we picked a date out 2 or 3 weeks.
And then to do what exactly? To bring it back?
Well, that's what they're talking about, and then just bring it back later.
And that just happens via motion?
The next meeting that we will have past next week would be the 7th of August, which is when we're having our final budget and truth and taxation. I wouldn't recommend we make it that day.
It's going to be a heavy night.
Why not?
So that would put us to the 14th. I gotta say, having spent enough time a long time on the Planning Commission and trying to consolidate, incorporate unincorporated islands and seeing how they kind of just have trickled in a little at a time as they naturally would, and how some will never come in, which is why the county has done what they've done. And I think as far as our noticing and the outreach, we have discounted what the county's done too. I mean, I don't think there's been a lack of opportunity or notice. I just don't see it. And I don't know what we're going to accomplish by postponing it. I just don't see what we would do.
I view that the same way. I think we've gone the extra mile in notification, both city and county. There wasn't a secret that this was coming up.
So, with all due respect, I get where you're coming from, and I respect that you believe that there was enough or sufficient notice, and I believe that might be the case. But I'm seeing people here expressing other sentiments, and I can't disregard that because there's been a pattern, there's been a history of these things happening in the past. So I agree with you that extending may not solve anything. I do agree with you on that. But I can't just ignore the fact that there are people here expressing concern, expressing, and they can't even talk to us right now because our norms don't allow that. Our norms don't allow these people to come back and talk to us and tell us how they're feeling and give us a little bit more feedback on what's happening. And we're talking about just changing the livelihood of people and impacting their lives that they've been building for all their lives, right? And so if we had never had this issue in the past, I would feel very comfortable going along with you and saying, let's just continue. But this is not the first time this happens. Okay. And again, I have a lot of respect, and I don't mean to disrespect anyone. I have a lot of respect for what everybody does in the administration, but I feel compelled to express my opinion, and I mean no disrespect to anybody.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the same thing. I saw your note. So the opportunity to address this again, I think, is the 14th. Is that a safe date, Janine?
Well, I'm just wondering, after talking with our attorney here, that maybe we should just go a week to the 17th.
Next week? Okay.
And the reasoning is because of the Bonavista issue, there is some time constraints on getting that done before the end of the year. And the more we push it back, the harder it gets to get it done in the time frame that's needed.
I just would like time to correspond with these people, since I didn't get any of the emails that you guys were talking you had gotten from constituents. I didn't know that there were any resident was giving any feedback at all.
I think we only got one email that hasn't come up tonight. It was Vicki King. Glenn, can you update us on Ms. King's?
Yeah, I got it now. He sent it over.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I didn't know we had gotten any. So.
Janine, can you explain, please, just a little bit more what are these concerns that you just talked about?
Maybe I'll have Mr. Stratford do that.
So just like the process for the annexation has some public notice and public hearing requirements, the shift in the Bonavista Service District has similar notice of intent and publication of notice. Now, all these people will already know about it, but the point is the law requires us to go through that, which is an extended period of time. My concern is that it would really be great to get this done before the end of the year so that there's not any issue of that tax somehow rolling over to the next year after, if the annexation goes through, so that that's taken care of within this year. And if you go into August, I'm not saying it for sure will take killer till December, but the more it pushes out, the harder it is to get all that done in time.
Are you talking about a process that needs to take place, that needs to happen? Has it somehow been forecasted that should happen because this was going to happen?
No, if it was forecast, then that would have already been started. The point was that until you made your decision about annexation, there wasn't any need to push that issue forward because it's waiting to see how this legislative process works out. If it was forecast, then that would have been running simultaneously. And so the point was to wait until you make your decision before we go out and adjust that boundary with Bonavista.
So I guess it's been a good conversation. For those of you that are seeing this conversation for the first time, it's not the first time we've had it. I think there's a lot of good intention and good hearts with the folks that are here. We just sometimes have a hard time connecting with some people, and it's a little bit frustrating at times for some of us, but I don't think we have hard feelings about it, but we do wish to improve. So I'll make a motion and I'll just see where it goes. But as we're dealing with a decision that impacts people's lives pretty significantly, it's my belief that we can wait a week to make the decision, but with the potential for some concerns being allayed, but potentially not. So I'll make a motion that we delay proposed ordinance 2018-21 until July 17th with a request to the administration that you reach out to the folks that have come tonight in opposition to discuss the concerns or if such request is not amenable, directive to our council staff to reach out to those folks and to discuss their concerns. And if not allayed or not, we can make a decision on the 17th.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Nadolski, seconded by Councilmember Chawerka to delay till July 17th. And this is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
No.
Okay, That passes.
Chair,
Yes.
one thing that would be helpful to us is if Mr. Montgomery went out into the hallway and made some appointments. We have a week, and we're happy to meet with these individuals, and if they could accommodate so that we could line up a schedule of when we can meet, we would be. I think we can get this done by next week.
I think that would certainly expedite, since we do have a short time.
good idea.
Thank you for that.
Since the next item is a companion, we would recommend that you push that to next week also.
I was going to suggest that also. So let's go ahead and have a motion on item number 6.
I don't know, I mean.
Chair,
Go.
Chair Heyer.
Councilmember White.
Sorry, I just, is it a voice vote or is it a roll call vote?
Just a table, it was a voice vote.
And then, can I make a comment? Because I'm glad that Mr. Johnson brought that up. But my concern isn't necessarily the outreach to the citizens. My concern is that we haven't voted on the second 6A, and so it actually affects the annexation. So I think we do need to either talk about it or table that as well.
Okay. All right then.
Chair Heyer?
Yes.
I was just going to say that taking action on 6A may alleviate some of the concerns of some of the citizens. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go ahead and entertain item 6A.
Chair Heyer, I'll make a motion that we.
Have we had our presentation on that?
Oh, sorry. Right.
Mr. Stratford's going to present it.
Chair Heyer, members of the City Council, yeah, certainly whether you take action on this or not or whether you delay it is fine, but I want to make clear, well, I guess I'll start back and then try to make something clear at the end. So Ogden City has an ordinance that requires people within 300 feet of the sanitary sewer system to connect to that system within 90 days after receiving notice to do so. That is authorized in multiple places, including state law as well as our own ordinance. And in fact, when you read the state law that talks about this, it describes that part of the reason is to allow sewer systems to function, to be funded, and to be maintained, and that mandatory connection ordinance or mandatory connection requirement helps to pay those costs. And in fact, it's not just us. So our sewage goes to Central Weber Sewer District. We have a contract with them, and under their contract, they mandate that we have that ordinance because, again, because they process sewage, it's in their interest to pay for those things as well. And so in a way, to change that is somewhat in conflict with our contract with Central Weber. But as the issue of these island annexations came before the Weber County Commission, this was one point in particular the Commission was very aware of and concerned about as it was raised, and the potential cost that might be imposed on people who are essentially coming into the city somewhat involuntarily, or at least without them making that request. And there was a concern on their part that if there was a significant expense associated with connecting to the sewer, that they might be less inclined to recommend annexation. And so Mayor Caldwell did write a letter to the Commission explaining that he understood that concern and that he would suggest to you as the council that in these specific situations where an annexation takes place, not based on a petition of the property owner, but based essentially on a recommendation of the county or on a city petition, that there be essentially an extension of time for any sewer connection to take place. Not a complete waiver, but an extension until certain circumstances are met. And so what the ordinance proposes is that extension of time would apply to the time a septic system fails or is replaced by the property owner, until the second one is until there's additional sewer demand generated because of some change in the property, some development or expansion of use on the property that wasn't there currently, or if a sewer connection is brought to within 5 feet of the property line. And I think that's probably the biggest issue here, is especially people on 2550 are concerned that if they would have to bore under a public street, that'd be significant expense associated with that. Well, if you bring the sewer to within 5 feet of the property line, all you're doing is crossing the park strip, essentially. You're not having significant cost associated with crossing under other streets and other kinds of utilities that are out there. And so that's the suggestion, is to amend that connection requirement in these cases. So what I want to make clear is, if you pass this ordinance, you can pass this and not make any judgment or determination that you're actually going to go forward with the annexation next week. So this would apply any time today or in the future that somebody comes in where they don't file the petition. And so it's not really prejudging your action, and as has maybe been suggested, it might help to let people know, yeah, this recommendation was made by the county, the city responded to it, and you followed through essentially with kind of that effort to reduce the potential impact of the annexation. And as we've already discussed, anything dealing with sewer connection fees, we'd probably have to deal with separately, but this is a way to move that forward, not just for tonight, but for any time that an annexation like this happens.
That fee would be from that other company?
No, the fee is, I'm sorry if I cut you off. The city charges a connection fee when somebody connects to our utilities, whether it's water or sewer. And it's a fee associated with having to tap into that, and it's a fee we assess. But that's something we would need to address on a separate issue. But I don't think anybody that's being potentially annexed by the discussion you've had tonight would meet any of these 3 requirements, immediately or anytime soon. So there would be some time to discuss that.
Robert, can you remind me just to make sure, and potentially for the people that are here, what is the primary reason why this is in the best interest of the city?
The 300-foot rule or the change?
The 300, well, we're saying it would force people to connect to our sewer line if they're within 300 feet.
That's what the current ordinance says, is if you're within 300 feet.
Okay.
The proposal before you is to say that if you are annexed into the city without filing a petition, which is what everybody here would be subject to, that wouldn't apply to you, that there would be an extension of time to connect to the sewer until one of those 3 things happens, until it's 5 feet away, until you do something significant to develop your property, or until your septic system fails and needs to be replaced. So that's how it would help them, is they wouldn't have to do it until one of those 3 things happens.
And to waive the fees, there'd be a separate issue on that at a later date.
That's correct.
Would the mayor have to sign off on that?
Well, it would be an ordinance change, and the mayor has to sign off on every ordinance, one way or another. So, yeah.
So if this ordinance were to pass right now, but the annexation proposal were to fail, then this would be technically not effective.
It's still effective. It wouldn't affect them, the people who aren't annexed, because they're not annexing. But any time in the future, when a similar type of annexation occurred, it would already be in place to help, whoever was annexed at that time.
Any other questions? I think that comment was kind of in harmony with what we talked about on our work session, where we were concerned about, expensive fees being charged to someone without their being the driver. So this seems to be in harmony with what our discussion was there. Okay. What's the pleasure of the council?
What was that, Chair Heyer? Sorry.
What would you like to do?
Oh. While you guys decide, may I make one quick comment?
Sure.
I just want to clarify a previous statement that I made about citizens not being able to come back and express their opinion, because I missed the fact that we still have public comments.
Ooh.
So I apologize about that.
Potentially after we take a vote, however.
However, correct, yes. Yeah, but, yeah.
Chair Heyer.
Yes.
if there's no further comment on this or any other issue, I will go ahead and make a motion that we adopt proposed ordinance 2018-23.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Blair, seconded by Councilmember Stevens to adopt ordinance 2018-23. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Choberka?
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember White?
Aye.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Vice Chair Nadolski?
Aye.
Chair Heyer?
Aye. That passes. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding your concerns or ideas on any topic. Please come forward and limit your comments to 3 minutes after you give us your name.
I like this meeting, but it's too long. Okay, I hear very well Mark Johnson, how he made his explanation about why we are in this situation, the budget. And I hear very well you too, Mr. Stevens. For me, sometimes, let me remind what Mr. Johnson said. We are doing the best we can. My conclusion is maybe we have to put the mirror in our front and look, not your hair, nor your makeup. Look ourselves and said, I am good enough to take care the city. Because sometimes we are not good enough to take care. Because let me tell you, Layton City for the last 3 years, and this year they pass again, they take down the property taxes. Why? They take down the property taxes because they receive really good income in the sales taxes. You can search that. It's not fair for the citizen, us, pay inefficient government. It's not fair for me pay more taxes. And the explanation said $27 maybe per houses. It's not true. It's not fair for the citizen pay for inept administration. For me, it's very clear. Corporation, $200 million. A small business, the budget work the same. Doesn't matter how much money you make or you handle or whatever. For me, it's very clear. We have to be efficient in our job. Layton City did it. Why Ogden City don't? Because we are not efficient. I don't point my finger for anyone of you guys, but it's the truth. We can pay inefficient. I answer right? Inefficiente?
Inefficient.
Inefficient. Sorry, my broken English. I love you guys, but we can. I don't agree, and I recommend to you to not pass the property taxes to go up again. We have to create more sales taxes. That is the point. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just feel like Lewis has the right idea. We've got to give these people more time to understand their position with your position. I don't agree. I'm sorry. I don't agree with it. And I think the people are being cheated out of their properties.
wanted to thank the city for letting us come this evening to meet with them. I don't believe that we was invited to the open house with the city with this gentleman over here. And I believe that we need to expand on the septic tank situation. You know, what's a failure? When you guys say failure, it's done and over with. I mean, if you know, from an engineering standpoint or plumber standpoint or the health department standpoint, if the drain field fails, is that a complete failure of the system? Because it doesn't work anymore, but you can replace that drain field. So there needs to be a little bit more added to that if we could look at that, maybe with the engineering department or city's engineers. But all right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next? If you do want to speak, why don't you come up towards the front, and we'll kind of line you up near on that front row, and then you'll be all set.
My name's Paul Jensen. I own Jensen Auto on Midland Drive. There's two properties. I've got one on Midland Drive and one behind it. I didn't have any intentions of speaking today. This was a reconnaissance mission. But a lot of questions have been brought up, and I don't want to make myself a target. I'm not in I'm not in Ogden City. Like any other business, you know, reviews and et cetera, you only hear the bad for the most part. You don't hear the good. I've struggled with being in Ogden City. I mean, I understand the services, the water pipe that come to me. I'm well aware. I bought it. I paid for it to come to me because I was the first one there. Ogden City almost put us out of business a number of years ago. Wheelwright Lumber wanted to be annexed in. They tore up Midland Drive and then shut the road down the entire winter. I had four-wheel drive trucks that had to get back and forth from 3300 over to us so that we could get our parts. Call Ogden City or call Weber County, it's not our road. Call Ogden City, the road's closed, we can't plow that. Lots of friends that have been in Ogden City that indicate, and once again, I don't know this, Ogden City is extremely unbusiness friendly. I've had a lot of people that have tried to build in Ogden City and can't. They pack up, they sell it, they move out. As far as the sewer is concerned, I do have a question there. When they tore that road up and almost put us out, they ensured the fact that they put that in the property 10 or 15 or 20 feet in the center of my driveway. Therefore, I assume that puts me within the 5-foot range. So does that mean I'm automatically have to get on, or does this allow me to have whatever time frame that is until said failure? So I'll be within the 5 feet because they put it in quite well. That was it. I don't have a problem with coming in Ogden City. I have a problem with the fear that maybe big city or whatever brings with it, if that makes sense. I mean, I realize my water's going to go up, my taxes are going to go up, and they're probably going to go up substantial from what I understand. If that's what we got to do to play, that's great, but I want to make sure that, I just want to make sure. I don't know what I'm getting into, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ed Sarver again. I just wanted to thank the council for giving us some more time for input. I was unable to make it the night of the open house. I have been in to discuss with Eric down in planning, but you can get some questions asked, but to have a forum where you can actually have some meaningful input to you folks is a little bit different than just a brief interaction down in planning. So I appreciate that opportunity. I'm certainly glad to make an appointment with Mr. Montgomery. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I would remind you, if you stay behind a little bit after this meeting is over, talk to Mr. Montgomery, make appointments. Also, any of the council members are free to discuss things with you. Our phone numbers and contact information is on the city council website, and feel free to avail yourselves of opportunity to speak with any of us.
Mr. Hire?
Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Mhm.
So is this going to come back for discussion to our work session, or is it going to automatically come back for voting here?
It would
to-
come back to our regularly scheduled council meeting, as I understand it. That's what we've.
So how would we, if we needed to and wanted to have an opportunity to, because of the developments that happened right now, we wanted to have an opportunity to evaluate what happened. How are we going to be able to do that before it comes?
We
for
could
a vote?
actually, if council members want to discuss it in a work session, let us know before Friday morning.
I'm letting it know right now.
Okay, so I guess we're
do
going to
have
put it
that
on a work
desire.
session agenda for next week. So
We could discuss it before a council meeting.
absolutely, and that's what you're asking, right?
Yes, as long as
Okay.
we have an opportunity to find out what happened.
Okay.
It doesn't matter where, but.
Okay. I
Thank
think
you so
we-
much.
We can accommodate that.
Thank you, Chair Hire.
Okay. Where were we? Right.
Comments from the administration.
Oh, yeah, administration comments.
Thank you. We appreciate the comments we've heard today. I've talked to Mr. Montgomery, and if you would be amenable to it, we may see if we could borrow Glenn also to help with some of these appointments. We're going to try and make it available. Our planning staff, we have 6, well, not counting the weekend, we have like 5 days. They have planning commission meeting tomorrow night till about 11. You remember what those were like, Chair? So we'll use our planning staff the best we can to accommodate times, and maybe we could also get a little help from Glenn, who I think could, if he's willing to help, that would be wonderful too. Mr. Montgomery's going to head out now, so as these individuals leave, if he'll stop, Greg will try and arrange a time tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and then he'll be prepared with Glenn to come back on Tuesday in work session and report to you where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Before you get up and go, there may be council members with comments you might want to hear.
Right. And is that the conclusion of your comment?
Yeah, I think we've said enough.
Okay, council member comments. I think I heard Councilmember White.
What'd I do?
Yeah, go ahead. I thought you were chiming in.
Oh no, I'm ready for it's later here, so I'm ready for
Oh,
a closed session.
Okay.
It's a lot later.
So other council member comments?
I just want to, if you don't mind, I'll make the comment. I've said it before on other proposals. I have a lot of resource at my disposal in this position, and I want you guys to have those resources as well. That's why I want you to have a little bit more time. Like I said, I went back and forth on where I stood on this proposal, but it will really help me. And I'm not afraid to make a hard decision, maybe even an unpopular decision, as long as I have all of the facts. And for me, having all the facts includes you guys having all the facts too. And if you're still opposed to it, and I am inclined to support it, which I'm still not sure where I'm at, but we'll cross that bridge next week. It just really helps me to make a decision when I feel like everybody's been heard and everybody has an equal understanding. That to me is a far more fair and equitable governance process. And so I appreciate the patience of the administration and my council peers, council staff, and the residents. Even if we don't change the outcome by what we're doing, I feel that we at least give ourselves all of our facts before we make a decision. And given the implications to some of you and your lives, I feel like taking an extra week on our end and committing the help of our planner, who's exceptionally talented, is time well spent. So I thank you for your patience, everybody.
Any other comments from council members?
I don't have a comment. I'm ready to make a motion, though.
I have a quick.
You moving on to
one last comment?
Okay, Councilmember Lopez.
Mr. Benitez, there's a culture that I've seen since I was elected here, that for whatever reason we don't respond, council members usually don't respond to citizens when they come and have negative comments towards us. Okay? I disagree with you. I don't believe that our city is inept or inefficient, and I am happy to sit down with you anytime you like to talk to you about your concerns and let you know why I believe that you're wrong. Thank you.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is consideration of adjourning into a closed executive session. I'll look for motion.
Chair Heyer, I would make a motion that we adjourn into a closed executive session for the purposes outlined in the agenda.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Blair, second by Councilmember Stevens to move into a closed executive session. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember White?
Aye.
Councilmember Blair?
Aye.
Councilmember Choberga?
Aye.
Vice Chair Nadolski?
Aye.
Chair Heyer?
Aye. And we will move into a closed executive session, and we will adjourn from there. So thank you for being here tonight, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next week. I think we'll see most of you, and appreciate your comments. Thanks so much.